But I'll say what can be helpful to listeners and what increases your luck is basically being as helpful as possible, being overjoyed when you can be helpful to someone that needs it. Because if I were to dissect what created the scenario where the founder of the company, probably the best performing company in our batch, is asking me to invest, what allowed for that was a unique perspective from him. He wanted to have a few founders invest. But then also all 90 days of Y Combinator was it was so communal, at least for me. And it was like, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help?
Today we had another fantastic guest on our 1947 VC podcast, James Beshara. James is a founder, investor, and encourager. He has started a few startups, sold one to Airbnb, and has invested in a few multi-billion-dollar companies in his career. He's written angel checks into companies like Gusto, Clubhouse, Bolt, Mercury, openAI, 50 plus companies. His portfolio companies have a market cap of about $50 billion. We covered a wide range of topics. How did he get into angel investing? What led him to start a fund eventually? We spoke about portfolio construction, fund construction. How does he source deals, pick deals, and win deals? What are his biggest wins and misses, and what were the biggest learnings from them? What's his relationship with India? Who is he outside of work? And much more. Now I bring you James Beshara. James, welcome to the show.
Shiva, thank you for having me, buddy. So good to see you again. Last time I saw you, we were walking on the streets of Mumbai, and now seeing you again with your new podcast. I'm excited to be a part of it.
I'm looking forward to it, James. And man, it was so much fun hanging out with you in Mumbai. And a good starting point, James, could be how did you first get into investing and what led you to start a fund? What was the thought process like?
I did it the right way, which is not the work. I don't do many things the right way, but this, I don't think it's an accident that I somehow seem to have a knack for investing, and ended up doing it the right way. At the same time, they're so, the strategy and the execution are so tied together, right? So I have built startups deliberately, sometimes the wrong way, where you sit down on a couch just thinking, what's the biggest thing I could come up with? Just total blind ambition. Investing was total accident. And that's how you know it's, at least that's how I know, okay, then maybe it's a little bit more substantial, because it wasn't blind ambition. It was friends asking me to advise and invest in their companies. And I remember the first check I ever wrote was into a payroll company called Gusto, and they were in our batch of Y Combinator, and they asked me to advise them and said, you should invest as well. And I was like, guys, I'm really a founder. We were in the same batch. I just felt like we both were starting the race at the same time. It's like, no, I'm really a founder, not an investor. And Josh, the CEO, said, I think you should invest, because if you're putting all of your eggs in your own startup, then it's actually a pretty bad portfolio construction. And I was like, what is portfolio construction? Looked it up, and it's so funny because investors constantly tell founders, don't invest, stay hyper-focused on your own startup. That's what the best investors in Silicon Valley were telling me that. At the same time, these are the people that know the most about portfolio construction in the world. Yet I was hearing about it from a founder. And so I looked up what that was and realized, having a portfolio where you have all of your eggs in one basket is, in a startup itself, is already so risky. It's pretty poor portfolio management. So then I thought about it. I had $24K in my bank account, wrote a check for $20K into Gusto. I actually don't even know what that's worth now, but they ended up becoming a mega decacorn. And within like a year, I was like, okay, I've got a little house money to write maybe another few small checks, maybe 2 or 3 more. And then 3 out of my first 4 ended up being unicorns. And so that was 10 years ago. And then because 3 out of the first 4 were pretty decent, just thought, all right, I might as well do this a little more and a little more and a little more. And then I ended up selling our company. We sold our company to Airbnb. And at Airbnb, after being a founder, working 70, 80 hours a week, I was working maybe 40, 50, and I had a little bit extra time. No kids at the time. And apologies if you hear one of my three daughters yelling or screaming in the background. Got three kids under 5. That extra time, I just loved it, leaned into it more. And then I think it was about 4 years ago, decided to do it full time.
Man, that's wild. You had what, 24K in your bank, and you ended up doing 20K into Gusto. What was that one reason, like, that sort of like, made you make such a big and risky bet at the same time, James?
It honestly was, so what's interesting is people think and I think you have the right appreciation and the right perspective for it, but I think to some people hearing it, it sounds risky. But Josh truly if you really think about it from first principles, he had the right perspective. It was risky to put everything into my own startup, and being right next to founders essentially of a really unique slipstream to invest, maybe the most unique out there. Y Combinator, after 90 days of getting to know different founders, different startups, it was actually really, really smart, very rational. And I think that the rationale that he imparted just kind of sunk in after a day of thinking about it, of me being like, oh shit, he's right. I am way over indexed in my own startup, and I'm going to be helping them anyhow. It's not like it's a dilution of focus, because that's the beauty of Silicon Valley and Y Combinator is you're really encouraged to help each other. And so it's like, there's no dilution of focus. I guess the downside is the financial side of things. But at the time, it was easier for me to invest in his startup than to try to figure out how to get like a brokerage account
Yeah,
and buy stocks. So I was
yeah.
like, okay, well, startups are kind of the asset class I know the best. I might as well invest in this asset class I know well and really diversify from my over-indexed position into my own company.
Got it. Good for you, my friend. And
Well, no, it's and then I should triple underscore this. I got so lucky, and I I got so lucky that just happened to be the first investment. But I'll say what can be helpful to listeners and what increases your luck is basically being as helpful as possible, being overjoyed when you can be helpful to someone that needs it. Because if I were to dissect what created the scenario where the founder of the company, probably the best performing company in our batch, is asking me to invest, what allowed for that was a unique perspective from him. He wanted to have a few founders invest, but then also all 90 days of Y Combinator was just, it was so communal, at least for me. And it was like, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help?
love it. Love the framework here, James. With this, you were talking about portfolio construction, and they say that pick a portfolio construction strategy that maximizes your edge. Uh, how did you, when you were doing the fund, how did you decide what fund size it should be, check sizes that you should be writing, stages that you should be investing in?
It honestly starts with the same advice I give to anyone that's thinking about investing in startups and it's typically individuals, where I tell them that the starting point of a portfolio theory is carve out however much you feel like you can invest in and want to invest in startups in an amount that you're okay with never seeing again. So this is on the angel front, and then I'll get to the fund front. That you say, okay, I'm willing to put 10% into the super risky speculative, maybe 15% because of what I'm about to say, but a small percentage into a speculative asset class. Then the reason it could be maybe 15% instead of 5 or something is because within that 15%, let's say it's 100K, divide that into 10 investments. And the ideal is that you have a third that goes to zero, and I'm sure people have talked about this on the podcast with you, but a third goes to zero, a third will be a 1 to 3x, and then a
Yeah.
third, if you're lucky, can be a 7 to 10 or north of a 10x return. And that can all come back and net you, a 5x fund. The math is pretty straightforward, but you're going to lose a few. And, obviously you're going to have an outlier. Hopefully you have one that's 27x or crushes it with 81x. And that math then allows for you to have a really nice upside to your capital, but not the worst case scenario is friends of mine that invest in like 2 startups. And I'm like, that's terrible approach to the riskiest asset class. So on the fund side of things, it was just basically an extension of that. The best funds, the best I can do is still probably going to have a third that go to 0, a third that go to maybe 1 to 3x, and then it's going to be driven by outsized returns. And that outsized returns, I've never read a book on this stuff. So I'm not going to know the terminology, but I know essentially 3 things when it comes to investing. The first is picking the deal is nothing compared to winning the deal. Finding a company that's growing 37% month over month for 6 months, anyone can say it's a great investment. But can you win the deal? And I'm happy to come back to that point. Second is for startup investing, because it's so risky, you basically have to have total risk on approach with each investment to where I just say everything has to be at least 20x, ideally 50x, because, and it's somewhat paradoxical if you have maybe a really stable bet that could be 4x or 5x, it's actually a terrible choice in your portfolio because you have to offset the fact that so many are going to go to 0. Even that thing that seems stable at 4x or 5x, as we've seen in growth stage investing right now, that's not necessarily stable. And in addition, you can't have your third bucket sit at 5x, 6x, 7x. You really need one that hits 21x or 37x. And to get that, you got to make a lot of bets in that space. Maybe for a fund, maybe 20 bets. So the second thing is you just have to have risk on with every investment. That's the only way to actually have risk off. That's the only way to have a balanced portfolio is you take the same approach with each investment. And that's somewhat paradoxical. And then the third thing is you actually have to provide value because of the daisy chain effect of providing value. The best founders tend to recommend great investors to other amazing founders. And if you get in that first, that you check that first box of you win the deal, but then you're not actually providing value, then you just won't be top of mind when the founder of X chats with the founder of Y, and founder Y is like, oh, these are my 2 favorite investors that you need to chat with. So happy to go into depth with those 3, but that's and that first one is by far the most important. Is picking them is actually quite easy. It's winning them that's pretty hard.
Got it. I think it's a very great point, for our next topic, which is, when you are fundraising for your first fund or even the, second, third, it's really like you're pitching, to LPs as a seed stage company, and you need to show, what differentiates you from other existing investors already, which is, how do you have access to these competitive deals? Because these competitive deals, founders don't really need capital because there's so much capital chasing them. For you, maybe you can talk about, how do you build that access, that brand? And secondly, when you were fundraising, what was your thought process? What sort of LPs that you were seeking for? And what are like the top, you would say, factors that triggers LPs to invest in fund managers?
It is similar to seed investing and seed fundraising, or maybe it's actually a little more similar as the funds get larger. And it's primarily my capital. So my funds, as we noted just before we hit record, this might not be that relevant to too many listeners because it's been a pretty anomalous route to investing. Like I said, it was almost reluctant, and then it was, let's say, 6 years before I ever thought about taking on anyone else's. I just never thought about raising a fund. So but it does map to seed stage or Series A fundraising, and that the fundraising process becomes really simple if the fundamentals are really awesome.
Hmm.
And if you're trying to outsmart or get around the fundamentals, then it could be three times the work, four times the work. Or said another way, if you're trying to be expedient, I want to raise a $10 million fund and I've only made four investments, seven investments all in the last 12 months. If you can think it's being expedient, but then it ends up being really difficult. Um, Whereas if you've been investing for 6 years with your own capital and small checks, and you have proof points, then that $10 million fund, you might raise that in 90 days, 60 days, 30 days.
Hmm.
So I can only speak to my experience in this when I've expanded from my own capital to quite literally my dad, my brother, um, Apoorva Mehta, the founder of Instacart. Um, when I've expanded it to friends and family that wanted to invest alongside me, when they just started to hear like startups are a great asset class, and 2017, 2018, it was pretty simple because I already had maybe five unicorns at that point, six unicorns.
Hmm.
By the way, I I've never calculated my IRR. I've never thought about the unicorns, except um, when uh, uh, when I was writing my Twitter bio. I was like, okay, I'll try to understand at least like what's the market cap of my seed stage investments, and that's the only time I've ever personally done the math. The only other time that the math has been done is by my lawyer for the deck, to find out what is that IRR been over time for the deck. But part of that is quite strategic in that it's just you never know what these things are. As we're seeing in the last 12 months, we don't know what these companies
Yeah.
are going to be worth. Um, a lot of times a brand can be ahead of the valuation, or the valuation can be ahead of the brand, and it's just it's, I think, unhealthy to ever do the math on like this is what I've got. Um, and so I just never thought about performance for those first 6 years. It was all like the healthy things of just how do I be really helpful. I don't need this to become anything. It's very um, I like to say that I have no results orientation in my investing. Maybe that's my daily study of Vedanta, but it is, and it's very Gita. I don't think about the results, and I've never calculated the kind of like what will I get out of this. It's just each day. Here are three things that I'm decent at, and I'm not good at many things within the startup realm, but helping founders fundraise, which I've raised about 100 million for my own ventures. Um, Helping founders with growth, especially consumer growth, and then third is founder psychology. Just all of the ups, all of the downs. I've seen them all, and it's such a brutal kick to the brain every day to try to build a company because the world is constantly not only telling you no, but wanting to kick your ass as a founder. It's so hard that that I love to help on the psychological side, just being that phone call at 11 p.m. when shit is hitting the fan and you need to chat with someone. So I tell founders these are three areas that I've honed in on to be helpful in. Um, and I'm probably not going to be that great or helpful in other things. And that's all I focus on is getting better and better at those three things. And that's, it's on the founder side of it. So the deck kind of like, I don't know, every once in a while, just calculate, put the deck together. But that's 0.5% of my thought process of LPs and their dynamics and fundraise and just all of those aspects. 99.5% of my thought is on founders being super helpful, getting really good at those three areas. Then what is really nice is you lift your head up to do that other side, the LP side, and it ends up being really straightforward and simple.
Got it. So it seems like for you, you had already created a solid product for LPs, meaning, you had a great track record, you had a great reputation, you had built a brand, and now, you were getting inbounds from your friends and other folks. Hey, can we invest alongside you? Uh, and James, with this, would love for you to kind of walk us through, how do you source deals? And winning, you said, you have these three specific value adds, which is, fundraising, growth, and founder psychology. Maybe we can talk about your, few of the big wins. One you already mentioned, Gusto, and would love, the other two that you mentioned. And then also some of the deals that you ended up passing, but down the road they became massive companies. And what were the biggest learnings for you from those misses?
Well, fortunately, Shiva, I've never had a. No, I'm just kidding. I've had so many misses, so many misses, and it seems to be like I have to just keep learning the same mistake over and over again. So happy to chat about that. The Some of the companies that have done well to date, and just sometimes, like I said, the valuation's ahead of the brand, or the brand's ahead of the valuation. It's some of my favorite companies just are profitable on a Series A, and they've never had a markup since the Series A, and I love those, even if the valuation seems to be static at X valuation. But some of the other early wins were Mercury, Gusto, Mercury, um, Bolt. I was the first check into Clubhouse. Um, the There's a social calendaring app called IRL that is another unicorn, and there's a handful of others that have these great valuations. There's a healthcare app called Next Health uh, that is phenomenal infrastructure company, really amazing founder. Alameen, and then there's a few in the healthcare space within that space. Cerebral, which one of the fastest companies to $7 billion valuation, started at the beginning of COVID, and just 2 years later, it's valued at $7 billion. So really really steep climb, and a handful of companies that I'm so proud to be a part of, but are run so efficiently and profitably. Like I said, that they just have never had a markup since um, Series A or Series B, but the world's going to know kind of who they are over time. I
Yeah.
have a feeling, but yeah, and I'm happy to go into mistakes. One of them, actually, I even mentioned Mercury, which I got to invest, but I'm happy to tell you the mistake that I seem to have to learn over and over again.
Yeah, would love to, James.
Okay, so um, with Mercury, I wrote a small check of 5K. It was one of my first investments in Mercury's online bank here in the US for startups. And I'm so thankful and lucky. I feel so lucky that I invested because of all of the stuff with SVB recently. I just happened to have been an investor in a competitor. So I was already telling all of my portfolio companies to use Mercury and was using it myself. But when Ahmad first told me the idea, we were getting lunch. He had already sold the company before, but I always think about this as just the lesson in investing. He was going after a space within fintech that I knew a little bit about. I'd been building a payments company, and I felt like I'd gotten burned in that space. And so I have this baggage of like, this is so hard. And two, I thought the idea, which is so dumb to say out loud, I thought the idea was too big to build the online bank
Yeah.
for startups. I just thought like that's almost too like Stripe being like, we're going to build better payments infrastructure than PayPal. And I think within the startup space, we can get too caught up into overthinking things and thinking like, no, there needs to be a network effect, and there needs to be two or three competitive advantages built in, and why can't I want to make sure no one else could do this. And the truth is, a really really powerful founder or co-founders going after a really big space, even if their number, and this is Elad Gil taught me this, even if they're number 16 going after the space, you'd rather invest in a space that is a known quantity, is known to be massive, with two really powerful co-founders that are so they are so committed to building a better experience than anything that exists. Um, and it might feel like they're like just trying to boil the ocean for 18 months, for 24 months. But if they have the right mentality and you know that there should be a better experience, then it's better to invest in something like and his was Elad's example, was one of the best investors of all time. He said, I'd rather invest in a chat app his example, than a robotics app or than a robotics company.
Yeah.
Yeah, robotics feels like it's new and it's on its way, but the creation of new spaces is actually so exceptionally rare. And the creation of massive companies in spaces that are massive that is the model. Google, was the 16th search engine. Facebook was the 12th different social network, but you actually find really big spaces and all-star founders going after them, and it's a better bet than kind of something that's brand new and cool and hip. But and you think it's special because no one's building in it. Sometimes you overthink it, and I overthought it with Ahmad. I was like, I'll write a 5K check, but I'm not gonna back up the truck, and I'm not gonna write 50K or 100K check. And I look back, and I'm like, man, the baggage in my own head about that space, and then also thinking the idea was too big. So I sound like an idiot to myself to say that out loud, because it's the whole point in the startup game.
Got it, man. Imagine someone like James, who has one of the best track records in angel investing. I know he's still learning. I guess this asset
Oh
classes just every day,
no,
every week, every month.
I constantly think. I say this all the time, that I don't know what I'm doing. It's like when you were saying, just using some terminology within investing with other investors, I'm like, I don't know what that is, and I need to go figure it out. But I constantly feel like I don't know what I'm doing, and I think maybe around year 7 or year 8, I was like, oh, okay, I'm doing this differently than other people, and that's a good thing. But in the beginning, I was going so slow. I probably wrote maybe 5 checks in the first 3 or 4 years. I was going so slow that I didn't think about it. Then maybe year 4 or 5 or 6, I was like, I should probably think about how to do this. And a lot of the approaches that I would read about didn't make sense to me. The other biggest mistake, I'll tell you real quick, is a company called Mighty. Sohail from Mixpanel, founder of a massively successful company already, similar to Ahmad. He called me for advice on the fundraise. Said he was thinking about fundraising, and he told me the idea. I was like, wow, that's a really cool idea. And 2 weeks later, I thought about it. Thinking, that's pretty cool. 2 weeks later, I emailed him and said, hey man, whenever you do the round, I'd love to invest. And he emailed me back. He goes, oh man, we already closed the round. It's oversubscribed. And what I learned there was, for a really hot deal, the leverage from being on one side of the table to the leverage going to the other side of the table can change so fast that it makes no rational sense. The best deals, the leverage can change. You can go from getting advice or giving advice on how to fundraise to 5 days later and the round is already done, because Max Lebchen just wrote the entire check, and then a few other people wrote checks, and I didn't get into that deal. So that one was one that I loved the founder. I have 5 different things that I think about when I make an investment, and it was 5 out of 5 for all of them. It's founders, product, growth, understanding of their growth, and then space. How big is the space? And I rank them 1 to 5. And if it's averages over 4, then I'll write a check. And it was 5. And yet I missed the window because the leverage shifted so fast.
So fast.
And I thought I had time.
Got it. James, with this, we're going to talk about India. You've been
Yes.
spending time in India and you've been investing. What's your relationship with India?
Oh my God. Well, it's still, it's nascent, but in terms of love and admiration for India. Every morning I wake up at 5 a.m. and I study Advaita Vedanta. Um, for 10 years, I've been studying Eastern philosophy, and 6 years ago, I wanted to go to the heart, the source of all Eastern philosophy, which your amazing part of the world gave us the Vedas 5,000, over 5,000 years ago. That's just so, this is the oldest known, in terms of continuous study, it's the oldest philosophy in the world. Um, the end of the Vedas, Vedanta. So that started about 6 years ago. And it didn't have much of a relationship to the investing side, startup side. It was just like, whoa, this feels true. And what is very interesting about it is you have people like Elon Musk saying that we're living in a simulation, which is very Vedantic. You have someone like Sam Altman, who last year tweeted, "What's something that did you see this tweet where he said, what's something you believe that no one else believes, and no one around you, very few people around you believe?" And he said, "I'll go first. Mine is, I think the quote was, uh, I believe that unequivocally Atman is Brahman," which is one of
Hmm.
the great aphorisms from the Vedas. And that's he's the CEO of openAI saying
Yeah.
Atman is Brahman. Um, I think in a world, especially in the startup realm, but really everything right now, in a world that is getting weirder faster, Shiva the Destroyer, in a world that is getting weirder faster, I think there's going to be this growing hunger for what isn't changing. What if everything else is changing so fast, so rapidly, and that rate of change is increasing? I think there's going to be a hunger for what is timeless. And for me, the wisdom in the Vedas just felt so grounding, so timeless. And every morning, it is my grounding wire before I, get started in the day with running different companies and venture funds. So that was the beginning of my relationship. And then I started studying with an ashram, Vedanta Academy. Started doing it online, uh, vedantaacademy.org, which is just so started. It's so technological. It's amazing. Basically, I have an ashram in my pocket that I listen to here from, and by the beach in Los Angeles, just
Yeah.
each morning. And that then led to me traveling to the ashram in person. And as I was traveling there, I was like, well, I might as well get to know the startups in India while I'm there. And that ended up leading to a handful of investments, and then discovery of good Lord, there's such, I think over the next decade, there's going to be, I mean, I'm starting to orient um, the majority of my investing to India because of just the asymmetry of how big the opportunity is. And you and I have chatted about this a number of times of just, it feels like it's where the US was 10 years ago. And the US is more obvious. And once something's obvious, the yield is gone. And India, for startup investing, it seems very obvious to me, but not too obvious to at least a lot of the cannons with massive amounts of capital behind them here in Silicon Valley and in California. That I love it. I love that they're like, I don't know, we're getting away from emerging markets. We're going to stay in the U.S. I'm like, okay, well, that's just going to be better returns for an investor like myself. So, and investors that are taking specifically India really seriously. I mean, it's the fifth biggest economy. Purchasing power parity, it's the third biggest. Um, you have things like UPI that honestly they leapfrog even what we have in the U.S.
Yeah.
That can allow for all kinds of really cool monetization with microtransactions that just aren't, that's still not possible here in the US because of credit card transaction fees. So yeah, I could spend, this podcast would become 4 hours long if I talked about my love of India from the investing side and philosophical side.
Yeah, no, I can always sense it whenever I'm chatting with you how excited you are about India. I think that was how we got connected initially. And no, James, totally agree with you there. And I'm excited that you're, deploying or allocating your capital, majority of the capital to India. It's definitely the next decades or more. It's just gonna be it will be compounding very very fast. And then there's this guy behind me. He's been bugging me, knocking me. His name is Alfonso. Is my co-pilot, and he wants
Nice.
to get in, James.
I thought you were
And
going to say that's Hanuman, but okay, Alfonso. I like Alfonso. Okay.
all right, that's what he told me. His name is Alfonso when I first met him. I don't know, maybe he has
Excellent.
multiple names. We'll
Yeah.
see. But James, he's asking if money and attention are not needed anymore. Typically, just in our DNA, human nature, that we seek money, we seek attention, fame. That's done. Like you already have all those things. What would you work on?
Myself, hands
Yeah.
down. And that, yeah, the Gita is pretty clear. There are 5 ways to help those around you. And the first is money. You see someone needs money, you can give them money. Second is you can give them your physical presence. You can help them, cross the street. You can give your emotional help. You can share wisdom. You can share your advice as a startup founder that's maybe 5, 10 years, 15 years ahead. That's helpful. But the most important work we do for others is the work we do on ourselves. And I think that ties to that first question we talked about of investing. The easiest way, and it's in some ways it also can feel like the hardest way, but the easiest way to become a great investor, or to at least have a track record that makes you seem like a great investor, is by actually being super helpful. And you can only be super helpful. It can't be like marketing speak. It can't be like, oh, I got the deal, but then I wasn't that helpful. Then you have the founder, Augusto, that's not introducing you to anyone else. Um, but if you actually can be really helpful through working on yourself, through knowing, I mean, just like not having an expedient results orientation towards startup investing, because it is such a long race. Um, but if you can disconnect from that impatience, and you're not trying to be transactional with relationships, you're really working on where you can be helpful, understanding the humility, and cultivating, like, this is what I can be good at, this is what I am good at, these other areas I'm not good at. Those different things. That's the work we do on ourselves, and then you just wake up and there's 1,000 flowers that have bloomed around you, because you've made yourself a reservoir. So I would just keep doing that, and then probably more flowers would bloom around me. But I wouldn't I wouldn't exactly know how or why. Um, it would just be, I don't know, similar to Josh. Founders would just knock on the door and say, "Hey, will you invest?"
I love it. And James, we know you as a tech founder, investor. What do your friends know you for? Who are you outside of work?
Oh, that's an interesting question. These are great questions. Um,
Alfonso
friends
is
know.
smart.
Yeah, Alfonso is very
It's
smart.
fun. It's him.
Well, then he and I would get along, and maybe that's why we get along too, Shiva. I really love personal relationships. Um, I really love to laugh, and I'm decently funny. And so yeah, my friends know me as kind of goofy, silly, um, fun, kind of in the moment type of person that can maybe switch from cracking some joke and laughing, and switch 5 seconds later to maybe some observation of the philosophical sort. So um, a friend described me that way on my birthday. My wife organized a surprise birthday, and a friend described me that way the birthday, and I was like, oh, that's a really I dig that description of the ability to go from the mundane, silly fun to the philosophical. So maybe that's
Love
that's how they describe me.
it. Got it. And James, what are you most obsessed about lately, and what's draining you?
Oh, that dude, Shiva.
Ah,
That's the question. That is,
yep.
I ask. Well, I want to ask you as a fellow podcast host. I want to ask you as someone that's building a fund, and just tip of the spear creating, like when you sent me your deck, it was just so clear you were not only way ahead of everyone, but painfully so. Like I'm gonna have to convince a lot of people that this is happening, which is the best place to be. You don't want to, like I said, you don't want to be somewhere where it's obvious because all of the yield really is gone. But what's the most exciting thing? The thing I ask people is, what's the most exciting thing in your head right now, this morning, your time, and then what's the most draining thing? So I want to ask
Got
you.
it. Yeah. So, you know, I'll start with the first one, which is I was super super excited to have you on the pod and the overall series. Super super. I've been thinking about this for months now, few months, and I'm so glad that we got this done. Secondly, I'm going to go hit the gym. I'm excited about that as well.
Nice.
Right after this, I'm pumped. And what's currently nothing that's draining me, but there were few things that were draining me. I would say a few months back, which was mostly around. It's a little philosophical, which is one is, how do you find happiness? Typically, you'll find happiness if, let's say, you're seeking something, you get it, and you'll be happy. But that happiness will stay for a little bit, not for too long, because then the nature kicks in, and then you'll be craving for something else. There's another way to get happy is, it's a Stoic philosophy, which is, the life that you're living is actually dream life to many many people around you. You can sort of like walk down the stairs and you can see people, meaning it'll help you realize that how lucky you are. So that, I was in that hedonic treadmill, which is, let me get this, and now I got this, let's get that. So I was not enjoying the things that I already have. So that's something I've started practicing. That was draining me, but now I'm excited to hear from you, James.
Well, it's yeah, it's so interesting that there's been, like we were saying earlier, this growing interest around philosophical views. Basically, just what's a healthy perspective. That's it doesn't need to be highfalutin and big words. It can just be, what's a healthy perspective, and what are some healthy perspectives people have had over time. In the same way you have a physical diet, maybe a mental diet is going to become more and more of a thing. The most exciting thing is, I mean, the thing that I guess you asked obsessed about. What's the thing I'm most obsessed about? Honestly, it's between, it's the hours before the sun comes up, and philosophical study are the most important hours of my day, and everything else just doesn't. As Swami Parthasarthi, the teacher, the founder of the ashram, will say, I mean, just nothing else matters outside of those hours, because, like I said, if you become a reservoir, then life is going to come to you. So that's what I continually just am awed by, and it's continually unfolding in fascination and brilliance and usefulness. And then kind of more pragmatically, AI and ChatGPT is just, everybody's talking about it, but everybody's talking about it for good reason. It seems to be, I mean, my wife, who's artist, not technical at all, she's on ChatGPT probably 45 minutes a day, an hour a day. So that blows me away. And that UX of a chat is just so beautiful. We've been waiting for that. People have made attempts for decades in this area, and now it actually feels real. So that is the really exciting thing from an investor perspective and tech lover. And the draining thing, I feel for founders that building a company right now, and I run two companies, a beverage called Magic Mind, which is
Hmm.
available. It actually, as of a few weeks ago, is available in India now. So Magic Mind, and then a salad dressing company called Side Dish. They're really fun side projects, and I've hired teams to help really build those out. Basically, just there's no good reason that we're all drinking coffee each morning, when nature and science give us so much more than that. And Side Dish is just, how can we make healthy really tasty. Um, and those are they fall in the same bucket. It's like building a company right now is it's on like crazy extreme hard mode where you have funding environments completely shift on you, change. You have the people with the microphones telling you one thing 12 months ago, the VCs that have the microphones telling you one thing 12 months ago, giving you money, joining your board, telling you it even louder, straight in your ear. Then it switches and they make, their management fees regardless. Um, and they're
Yeah.
living a portfolio distributed lifestyle. And your business is just completely flipped upside down. You've had to, reduce force and make layoffs. Your identity is caught into this thing. It's you don't know if it's going to survive, and then you add in, and that's obviously that's in addition to COVID. Then you add in an SVB bank run, and it just kind of feels like not only is anything possible, but you better prepare for it happening in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
Um, Pandemic, layoffs, bank run, completely changed funding environment. It's yeah, so that's the draining thing is just feeling for founders that maybe we're a bit overextended or just building for a world in 2021 that they thought was going to continue for the next 10 years. And obviously is it's pulls apart 12 months later.
Yeah, tough environment, and these were the things that were outside your control. And James, I am going to order magic drink in India. I didn't know that it's
Magic Mind,
available.
yeah. Yeah,
Magic Mind.
magicmind.com.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that. And James, thank you so much. I had so much fun. Thanks for doing it. I really appreciate that.
Of course, Shiva. Thank you so much for putting the podcast together. And uh, yeah, there aren't too many podcasts dedicated to people raising and running their own funds. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thanks for sharing your wisdom. I'm sure the audience would get to learn a ton from what you mentioned.
Well, thanks for hosting. And and I'll also I need to add thank you for carrying this flag of investing in India. I think it's going to be such a explosion of value created for the entire world as India becomes another startup world power up there with the U.S. over the next decade or two.
And we are excited to have you in India and investing, James. Really looking forward to investing together.
Yep, and I need help spreading the word that I'm investing in India. So Shiva, hopefully this episode, as well as anywhere you think that I need to, shout from the mountaintops that I am so long on India. Maybe more than anyone I know. That's my cohort of angels or solo capitalists. Let me know